and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup. This is a show about a conversation between me and a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. Thank you for joining me today. Today's guest has been a member of the Lightworkers Lab for around 2 years, and you can find her in the main lab, the Circle, and the Lab Lightroom. She hails near Baton Rouge, Louisiana with her husband Robbie, with a happy anniversary in order in the coming month, a 1-year anniversary, so happy anniversary ahead of time. And she also lives with a crotchety calico cat named Callie that she only recently became friends with. Sometimes it takes a while to really get in good with a cat from who is somebody else's. Like that same thing happened with my husband and I when we moved in together. He had a cat who was like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. It took a good year. Okay, as a dog lover, she hopes to add a small dog to the mix soon. She has 3 grown children, 2 sons and a daughter. Haley, who is also a member of the lab and is the reason our guest originally joined the lab, and hopefully we'll be able to hear the story about that and how that all came about. Soon. Or today in today's conversation. Let's just get Chris on here while she is an outdoor lover, especially fond of hiking in the woods or hanging out at the beach or in the ocean. She is an avid photographer. Look for her spectacular nature and cloud photos in the Circle, where she occasionally posts them. Although she says that some may consider her cloud obsession as a bit odd, that's what she loves about the lab, that there are other cloud watchers here, including me, and not too much is seen as weird. Despite her joy of photography, her biggest hobby is her plants, and she always has flowers blooming inside of her house. In fact, she still has a ponytail plant that she brought home to receive from her first job when she was 16, and wonders if a plant can be part of one's soul family. Hopefully we can talk about that. Like me, she's a Gemini and loves to always be learning something new. She has been all into learning about and expanding herself in a metaphysical sense, working on opening her abilities over the last couple of years. Her strongest gift is claircognizance. Clairvoyance is a close second, with a sprinkling of clairaudience added to the mix. She also feels very led to channeling and has had a lifelong interest in rocks and crystals, having some in her collection, including a big chunk of rose quartz that she gathered during her childhood. Please give a warm Lightworker welcome to Chris Collier Mahfouz. Yay!
Thank you.
Welcome.
I wasn't sure exactly when to come on, but
oh no,
thank
that
you so
worked
much
totally
for having
well.
me.
It's my pleasure. It's our pleasure. Thanks for being here today. And
well, thank you for asking me.
Anytime. So, I had mentioned that I've been experimenting with backgrounds, and I had an ocean pick up earlier because you had mentioned you like to hang around the ocean, but it almost looked like I was floating like a buoy in the ocean. So I took that one down, but I'm like, hey, I have this flower print that might work. And it actually kind of matches what you're wearing today. So I'm glad I went with that.
I love the watercolor.
Yeah, me too. I had mentioned earlier, a friend of mine had given it to me when she heard that I was creating a new space, and I told her some colors that I really enjoy, which are blue and yellow, and she found that and picked it up for me, and I'm like, oh, I bet she'll feel pretty honored that I'm using it today. Although she's not a member of the lab, but she can watch the replay and she'll see it and she'll be like, hey, I recognize that.
Well, it's very beautiful. Yeah, it looks nice. I love the colors.
Thanks. I thought it was abstract enough that it might add interest but not be a distraction. So we'll see.
There you go.
So how are you doing today?
I'm good. Of course, a little nervous. I'm not used to this, but thank you. I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in southeast Louisiana, so everything's great.
Good. I am so happy to hear that. Here in Minnesota, it is nice, but it's supposed to rain later. But I'd rather it be rain than snow at this point, so I'll take it.
There you go. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I can handle snow a couple of times a year, like last year, but it's just too cold. I'm just not used to cold temperatures.
Yeah. Even here, you have to acclimate every year. It's not like all of a sudden living up north, it's all, once it gets cold, it's no big deal because we're used to it. It's not really that way. It's like I'm still used to summer and fall is supposed to help us get used to it, but I haven't been outside as much as I'd like. So when I do go out there, I'm like, what? No, isn't it still July? I guess I'm getting, I'm missing the warm weather more than the cold these days. But
Okay.
so I like to start out by asking a pretty general question, and sometimes it can take the whole rest of the time to talk about it because it leads us to other things and stuff like that. And maybe it won't. Maybe we'll go into other topics after you tell your story. But I'd love to hear your path to the Lightworkers Lab and or your spiritual journey. And those might be kind of two different things. So go with whichever one you want to share.
Oh, excuse me. I'm kind of hoarse this morning.
Sure.
Oh, well, they do kind of collide, but, it was a more recent turn on my path to make it to the lab, but it was because of the spiritual journey. I guess I always considered myself spiritual. It was really was raised in Christianity. Went to church every Sunday, sometimes, other events. But mostly when I was growing up, it was going to church on Sundays, mostly with my mother. And it seems like men aren't quite as into going to church as women. And, it seems like there's more women just in spirituality, though maybe that's changing. But sometime after high school and got involved with all the crazy, college scene and all the, stretching my wings and just getting kind of crazy. But,
I hear ya.
Getting kind of off the rails a little bit. But, got married in my later 20s and I started feeling that pull again. It was never really far from my mind. Don't get me wrong. I say the college scene like I was some wild child, but I wasn't. I mean, I drank a little bit, and I actually inhaled a few times. Smoked a little bit and inhaled. And
I did a lot more than a little, so you're good. Yeah.
And I really, well, hey, there's no point in denying. Hey, so what? Kids are going to experiment. That's just the way it is.
Yep.
And if that's all we did, that we were doing good. And so I started just kind of, like I said, it really wasn't far from my mind. I mean, I think I might have read a book or two. I mean, it seemed like the big book that everybody was reading back then was The Late Great Planet Earth. And I think if I remembered right, it really just had to do with sort of prophecy, sort of the end of the world thing, the rapture and that kind of thing. But then later on, I got married, had my kids, and just started to have that pull again to go to church and do something, and church was the only avenue I knew. And my husband he just wasn't as spiritual, he just wasn't into it, and it was mostly me. And I was trying to find a place, as my kids were still really young, what they call a church home. And I was trying to find a church that I, felt welcomed and, friendly, and that, my kids would be safe and happy. And
Sure.
and learn good things, learn about God and Jesus and the Bible and all of that and everything. But I just was so disappointed everywhere I went, and I gave up for a while. Found a church a little bit later on when my kids were my boys were maybe in their early teens. But it was, the people were nice, the church was nice, but they just espoused some things that I in the end, I just could not tolerate. I mean,
I hear you.
I mean, just crazy stuff. I just, I think the straw that broke the camel's back was when the pastor of the church said he believed that divorce was the unpardonable sin. So, which is supposed to be that thing that no matter how much you apologize or beg forgiveness for, that's not good enough. You're just going to go right to hell and burn and whatever.
Right.
And which I never did. I never did really believe. I never believed hell. It just never did make sense to me. There just were things that just didn't never made sense to me. I mean, if we're like children of God, then why would you throw your children in hellfire? You know, that's just crazy. That just doesn't make sense. There were just so many contradictions and things. I remember I asked one time about, in Genesis, when people, so God created Adam and Eve and everything, but then, there was the story about their children, Cain and Abel, and Cain ended up killing Abel, and he was banished to go off to, I've forgotten what it's called now, the place, and he went there and married a woman or whatever, and had children or whatever. I'm thinking, okay, well, if y'all are saying that Adam and Eve are the only people on the planet, that's what they make it sound like. I think now they probably, I don't know what they say now. Surely they believe that there's other people on the planet other than Adam and Eve. I think there was a special story about them. I'm starting to believe that they actually did exist, but not quite in the way that it's taught.
Sure.
I don't want to get too off on a tangent. That's one of those Gemini things. I'm like, that's interesting, and I'm off and running and investigating that.
Yeah, so when you have two Geminis, hold on.
Right. We could be all over the place. But I don't know, cutting the long story short, I just never did quite. There was just too many things, and I just couldn't resolve it. So I just put the whole church thing on, kind of the back burner. And, next thing I know, I stumbled on a thing on the internet about angels. And I thought, well, I'd heard of angels. They were in the Bible, but hardly ever mentioned. I mean, you mostly hear about the bad angel, or the bad angels, supposedly the bad one. So that kind of got my train of thought derailed.
Oh, you were talking about finding angels online, something about angels.
Yeah, it was a little webinar. And I listened to several people talk, and then there was one lady that, I don't know, just really appealed to me. I ended up getting on her email list, and I took a few classes from her. She has a small group, and I have taken a bunch of classes from her. And it just, the rest is history. It sort of has just evolved, and my daughter, oftentimes a crisis in someone's life will, lead them in a new direction or help them to just really dig deeper to answer questions or find answers to their questions. And my daughter was she's a member of the lab. She just isn't she's busy and working and young still, so she's not really in the lab too much. But she was in a very serious automobile accident when she was a senior in high school. She was not driving.
Wow.
She was in the back seat of a big truck, and with a group of other classmates of hers in her class. She was thrown around in the accident, ended up with a broken back, broken arm.
Oh my gosh!
Just all kinds of injuries, and and she was on medication, a lot of medications afterward for pain and everything. And and it really just opened, the whole thing, the wreck and everything just really just opened her up in a hurry. She just remembers she remembers watching the ambulance from above. But she never did, she didn't die or anything. She never coded. But I guess it was just such a trauma to her body. And but it sort of started from there through her and her experiences. She was opened up and started experiencing things, and I didn't know what to do. I just felt so helpless. And she was such a bright, shining light, I think, in the astral. And she was spontaneously going into the astral at night. And it started out being a lot of fun, and it was great. But she ended up just having some issues, and I didn't know how to help her, so she started looking online and found Crystal. So,
awesome.
and she had I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 readings with Crystal, and I ended up getting a reading. And then just a short time after, joined the lab, because at the time you had to take a class from her, I think. And I was seeing these symbols all the time, and I was just wondering about that. And I ended up taking the symbols class, which was just on demand at that point. And it was really too advanced for me right then. And so I didn't do a lot with it. But I got in the lab, and my dad died 5 years ago in January. This seems like random, but it does fit in with the conversation. 5 years ago, this coming January, he passed, and I had and I think it was it was maybe February a couple of years ago, and I was thinking about my dad, and it was on the the 3rd year anniversary. And I was sitting there just thinking how tragic, it was, things about his life, and which I can't get into or I'll be crying, and everything. And I just, I got so, I cried my eyes out and everything. And I started, right after that, I started hearing like noises around the house, knocks. They were usually in threes. I found like 3 pennies, 3 dimes, just stuff like that, and just mostly, knocking. Or I would hear like 3 steps in the attic. It sounded like it was on the roof or the attic. And then my husband started hearing it too. Ooh. And we both heard it for probably a week or 2 before finally I asked him one night when I heard, I said, "Did you hear that?" He said, "Yeah." And he said, "I've been hearing that." I said, "I have no idea what that is." Mm-hmm. And one night we were getting ready for bed. He was already in bed, and I was in the bathroom, which share a wall. And I hear this tap, tap, tap. Well, it sounded to me like it was in the bedroom. And I said, "Did you hear that?" And Robbie said, "I thought you did that." And I said, "No, I thought you did that." So it finally dawned on me later, after I got a reading, that it was the 3 was apparently because it was the 3rd year anniversary. And I guess it just seemed to make sense to my dad to give me the 3s. But I just didn't really put it together. I've been watching shows like Ghost Hunters and all this stuff, and everything in 3s was like satanic, and and oh my God, so and I got a little freaked out. I thought it was Daddy, and then I thought, well, what if it's not? Maybe it's something terrible, and I don't know. I just hadn't been in the lab long enough to learn about Dominion and all that, but it wasn't long after that I did. But it was him, and there was a reading that alive that Crystal did with Justine, Lauren, and Jessica Potter. And that was when, and I asked for a reading and asked something about my dad, if he's with me and everything. And I got a great reading, and it really tied everything together. And I just knew without a doubt it was him. And then I'd been in the lab even probably 6 months, but just hadn't done anything with it, just occasionally looking. But I decided then, oh my gosh, I've got to learn more. This is awesome. And there you go. That's kind of it's a very short version of the path to the lab by way of also my spirituality and kind of.
Thank you for sharing that. There's things in there that really resonate with me. I find the more I talk to people, and what I've seen in the lab is that there are a lot of people who have made an attempt to find a place in a church community. My mother was one of those, and so she would take me from different church to different church, trying to find one that really felt like a good fit for her and for us. I have two younger sisters, and at some point she landed on one for a while, but even that was one where at some point she became disillusioned. And it was fascinating for me to be able to go to all of these different types of churches and different denominations. And my grandmother would take me to Catholic services as well, which was one my mother wasn't interested in. And so I really got a nice, I'm not deep in terms of my religious knowledge, but I have a breadth of knowledge in terms of differences and similarities between these different practices. But what I found for myself is that later in life, not that late, because I'm still really, really young. but later I was looking for that for myself as well. And my husband and I landed upon an evangelical church that at first seemed to really suit our needs, until the pastor started talking about men going to work, doing their jobs, while women doing whatever it is they do. I don't know, basket weaving. When he said that, he heard from me right away, because I'm like, wow, really? Is that really what you think of your female parishioners? Because you've got people who are, and he was a chair for my master's degree, my master's thesis. So I'm like,
Wow.
Well, that's a disconnect. But there were a couple of other things, and there was a final straw, and I'm just like, I can't do it anymore. This is just not for me. But it's just intriguing to me to hear people's stories around religion, because we're trying to find something that fits. And it's not like the stories of the Bible. I'm not well versed on the Bible, but the stories seem to really resonate. And we hear a lot of that in the lab with Crystal and Trisha having, a strong, what was it? They use a specific word that I'm missing now, but
fundamentalist evangelical. Yeah.
Okay. And so, those things are still intriguing to me, but I look at them so differently than I see a lot of other people looking at them, as though this is fact, and you have to follow everything based on the interpretations of the people who are presenting it to you. And so anyway, just that it's just a thing that resonated with me. But another thing that you were talking about, the thing about your dad coming back to visit, I had an experience really similar to that just a few, well, maybe only 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
I started hearing, and my dad is still alive, but I figured out, well, it could have been a combination of people, but I think I know who it was. And so it kind of coincided with a dream I had had, where this guy walked up to me, and he kind of looked familiar, but he didn't have the same features, and his eyes were not human eyes. They were just kind of, I don't know how to explain the eyes, but he walked up to me and he's like, "Don't you recognize me?" And he was really frustrated that I didn't recognize it. I'm like, no. After the fact, and I thought about it, then I did kind of recognize some of the features. But around that same time, I was hearing knocking in the house, and eventually my husband heard it, or at least a little bit of it, but I kept hearing it, and we did a process of elimination and couldn't figure out what it was. And then it turned, I think that my husband is a twin, and his twin brother had passed away. They weren't close twins. They weren't, what is it? They weren't identical twins. They were
fraternal.
Fraternal. Thank you. I always get the two mixed up. So, but they were kind of more like a night and day. He had features that my husband doesn't have, and vice versa, both in personality and physical. Just really fascinating. I would never have guessed this guy was his twin brother. But he passed away, and it was under tragic circumstances. And It seems like every year around the anniversary of his death, he pops into my head. And I recognize now that he was likely the guy in my dream. But because he had bright red hair in real life, and then he didn't have color in this dream, I couldn't identify him. Plus, it was almost like the only thing I remember was him walking up to my face and saying that. So I'm like, more like, "Who are you?" than, "Oh yeah, sure, you're him." But I asked my husband about, what, I kind of forgot about that. It was maybe a week before that anniversary when I had that dream, and then we heard the knocking, and then all of a sudden my husband's like, do you know today's the anniversary of his death? And I'm like, everything was like, oh, now I understand it. Because, I had another experience of seeing an accident after the accident, but the body was in the street of somebody who had passed, and it disturbed me. And I posted something in this circle about that. But all of that was happening around the same time. So I was thinking maybe it was more to do with that experience. But then when my husband said it was the anniversary of this, I'm like, that's what the knocking is. Because he comes to visit every year.
Wow, and I was thinking maybe he didn't like the red hair, so he just changed it.
Well, in Britain, they call them ginger. That's almost always their nickname, because they just have to point that out. It's such an interesting thing to me. Oh, you have red hair. Let's just call you something that reflects that. I don't really get it, but I've noticed it in British culture. And if you're British and that's not the culture you've experienced, then, certainly feel free to, oops, I lost my earbud, to say something about that. But what I've noticed is in TV shows and movies and things like that, they always have to refer to them as ginger. And the same with cats. But yeah, it was just one of those things where so when you said the 3, I didn't even connect the 3 years to the 3 knocking when you were talking about it. And it's like, oh yeah. So I wish I would have heard how many knocks I was hearing, because it didn't even occur to me to count them. Because now I'm thinking, it was a fair amount of knocking, and I think he's passed maybe 12 or 13 years ago. So, yeah, just an interesting connection there. Thank you for sharing that story.
Well, you're welcome. Well, it was just so obvious. Every time I heard the noise, it was always in 3s, and even the walking, it was like step, step, step. And,
that is fascinating. I love really, those experiences.
It was awesome, and I've actually he comes to me in the morning in that hypnagogic state, and I just gotten to where I've kind of figured out how to do it, and how I've kind of figured out how to extend that time and how to actually use my third eye. Crystal, I know in one of her many videos, she talks about when you doing the breathing when you're meditating at the beginning, and that you should put the tip of your tongue on the back of your front teeth, and there's usually a little fleshy little spot, and to hold your tongue there. And I just thought that was weird, but I thought, hey, I'll try anything. I didn't feel like I was really getting very far doing it the way I was doing it. Said, okay, well, maybe I've just been doing this wrong. So, but it seemed like that things did start to develop quicker after I started doing that.
Oh.
And from what I understand, because I just ran across something last night, reading that it was that something it sends energy through your tongue, and that there's some nerve or something that has something, and it sends energy to your pineal gland.
Oh,
but
cool.
So it's really, and then she also said that when you close your eyes, then point your eyes toward the area of your third eye, which is like crossing your eyes. It's kind of hard, it's really not a natural thing. So during the hypnagogic, I could tell that if I do that, and I somehow accidentally did it, I was seeing stuff. Like I saw his face. He writes me stuff. It looks like a little, like not a hand holding it, but like a pencil or pen writing "I love you." He does the "I love you" a lot. He sent me cartoons. Cartoons. I mean, who would have thought it? But he and I used to watch cartoons together when I was a kid, and maybe that's where it comes from. But
so when my dad passes, I'll get Monty Python's little symbols popping in.
You probably will. Yeah.
Either that or Green Acres, the two things we used to watch that my mom could not stand.
Oh, no. Oh gosh, yeah. I think my dad couldn't stand it, but my mom thought it was okay.
I don't know why I liked it. It's a little different watching it today, but I like to sing the song, the intro song to Green Acres. It's fun. I'm not doing it now, but
Okay.
That would scare people.
I can sing it with you, but yeah,
yeah,
I'm not a singer either. No, I always say I can't carry a tune in a bucket. So at least that's what we say down here in the deep, dark South.
I
In
love
the
it.
dirty South, is they call it isn't dirty. I don't know why they say that.
No, I've never heard that called the Dirty South.
Hmm.
Um, so do you remember what you were reading? Because that sounds really fascinating, the thing about the energy through the tongue to the pineal gland.
Actually, after I said the word reading, I remembered I was watching YouTube videos last night because my husband he was just so tired. He got up really early and he wanted to get in bed. So and we had um, ancient Ancient Aliens. Yeah, that's my favorite show on TV. I never watched TV hardly ever, but I love that show. It's fascinating to me. It's like, and that was really the thing that really convinced me of the existence of ETs.
Mm.
I just remember there's so many stories, and I'd cut my little spiritual thing short too, but another time, I guess. But,
Well,
um,
no, we have plenty of time. We can talk now.
oh no, well, one of the things that started the spiritual that really got me, shook my world. I mean, rocked my world, is I did not believe in ghosts at all. Period. I believed that when you died, you went to heaven. Wherever that is, wherever God is. and end of story. And I just believed everything else was a figment of people's imaginations. I mean, I didn't think I'd ever seen one. So, but my husband worked for, my ex-husband, he worked for a man that was just I really thought highly of him. He was really a super nice guy, just real, smart, intelligent, just, really liked him. A level-headed guy, but he got married, and he and his wife bought a home, and she wouldn't stay there at night by herself. Well, eventually he confided into my husband that it was just there was weird stuff going on in this house.
Mm.
They heard talking. They heard the dryer would turn on just in the middle of the night. Lights would turn. They'd wake up and lights would be on in their room.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
or they would hear commotion in the kitchen. They'd go in there and all the cabinet doors would be open. And just different things like that. And it really got me to thinking. And that's what really, I mean, I had to believe that they exist. So it was just like, I
Yeah.
just had to really, that really kind of, my paradigm or something kind of shifted then. And that was just one of the things too that catapulted me on outside the church kind of
Sure.
spirituality.
I remember this time, it was probably maybe 15 or 17 years ago. My husband and I, in fact, I think we were dating at that time, so it was probably more like 20 years ago. My husband and I went to Oregon and took a drive all the way down the coast. So we flew into Portland, but we took a stop off in Astoria. And we stayed at a bed and breakfast, and I kept hearing footsteps on the stairs every night. I always hear things when I sleep in other people's, like bed and breakfast and stuff like that. I'm always awake at 3 a.m. hearing strange sounds, but I've never really seen a ghost, except maybe in Astoria. There were two things that happened there. One is there was this house, a kitty corner from the place we were staying, that was dilapidated, but a beautiful manor in its time. And they had I didn't even realize it at the time, but at first I just couldn't stop staring at this place. I mean, I just stand there and stare. I really am not the type of person to do that, like just to gawk. But I couldn't help myself. My husband was like, get over it. What's your deal with this place? And, he's thinking I want to buy it and fix it up and that it would be a very horrendous experience. But I'm like, no, I just can't seem to, there's something that's just drawing me to this place. And then I realized at the bed and breakfast, they had a picture of this place in its heyday, which was white and yellow and just beautiful. And I took a picture of the picture so I could have it. Because I've never had that experience with a place before like a building or a structure where I just couldn't, it's like my husband was trying to block my view when we'd leave because he'd be afraid I'd want to stand there for 5 minutes staring at this rundown building. But the other thing that happened there, and my husband never wants to go back there. I love it, which is a sign, because he really has absolutely no interest in expanding his spirituality to the point of seeing ghosts. It scares him at this point. But the walking down the boardwalk in Astoria, all the people, I kind of think that we both saw ghosts. I just, all the people were kind of drawn like they were just, I mean, I'm going to say zombie, but not scary zombies. And, you know, there were real people there too, but there were people that just seemed out of place, and they just kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but I just remember walking on this boardwalk, and there were a lot of people, which was unusual for the time that we were there. And they seemed to be dressed in a different era, and they didn't really talk, and they were just walking back and forth, it seemed. And it creeped my husband out big time, which to me is a good sign, because he's super sensitive, you know, and I'm sensitive too. But I'm like, wow, what this is kind of fascinating. I want to hang out here. And he's like, no, you know, we need to go. But that's one of the things that really made me recognize, especially after the fact, when we could process out of the energy of the place, that, wow, you know, I seriously think that we saw people who weren't, you know, living today, you know.
Sounds like it. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And
wow. So like,
you know,
it was some sort of, you know, time loop, or
yeah,
some sort of, I don't know.
like a vortex.
Really,
I don't know if it was a vortex,
yeah.
but maybe two timelines intersecting. I didn't know about timelines back then, and I don't know that much about them now. I'm just really into them. But I do realize, or I read up a little bit, and they had a big fire in Astoria, and a number of people had died, and it was along that boardwalk area, I believe. And so after reading that, I'm like, oh, well, that explains it. And mentioned it to my husband. He's like, don't talk about it. You know, I'm just like, this is super cool.
Well, like an area where the veil is thin, and maybe y'all were seeing, you know, the two timelines kind of collided in that.
Yeah.
Well, if the past and present are if the past is still going on, that, you know, the time is not linear like we tend to believe it, then
so it could have been overlapping timelines and things where and see, now that just makes me want to go back even more. You know, I'll have to make it a solo trip this time. Yeah, he won't be coming with me. Maybe my daughter. She's got some she's got some budding skills of her own, and I think she'd probably, well, I don't know. She's kind of afraid of that stuff too, but she might be interested. There's no way the guy's coming though.
It's just the unknown. I think the fear of the unknown, I guess. And then if you've watched a bunch of movies, and I don't know.
He won't watch them. You know, he's okay with a couple of things that touch upon the theme, but I've been talking to him about what I consider a smear campaign. When I watch certain shows, it's like they always put things like seeing ghosts or having psychic abilities and or reading tarot cards, or, you know, or any of the clairs that pop up. They always show them as a negative light, kind of like, this is bad. You know, it's reinforcing that long set belief that we have been taught that these things are bad. And when I see them in these shows, right now we're watching an old series called Murder Mysteries. It's like this amazing British TV. It's been running for 19 years. Nothing runs for 19 years here, wow. But they have a lot of things that just keep going forever. And so we've been watching that, and it's kind of mild. But at the same time, I've seen probably 10 or 15, maybe more of those shows that intentionally mimic or mock many of the things that we hold dear in the lab. And so I'm using that in a way to say, look, it's a smear campaign. You know, these things, there's nothing wrong with them. But they're making it like people who have these gifts are bad. And why are they doing that? And asking those kind of questions. But for him, it's all fear. He just cannot, it's so ingrained for him that if you see ghosts, that's a bad thing. It's like, well, we could communicate with them and maybe help them on their way, for one, but also understand why they're still here. What's so bad about that? You know, I think that's a good thing. It's just
be afraid. If they're dead, then think, okay, well, if they're dead, they're dead. They can't hurt you. So what's the deal?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I wanted to say, well, it's because they don't want us to explore that. And you'll say, well, who's they? And then that would have to get me back into one of the other things I've kind of studied are the so-called conspiracy theories.
Oh,
About the same
yeah.
time, well, we left, that I just, didn't, got discouraged about going to church, is I found out about this Bible study, and I threw myself into Bible study. And my kids too. My daughter was really too young, and she was out on cloud nine or something, looking out the windows or something, bored. But we did Bible studies for quite a few years and everything. And in the midst of all that, I was doing the conspiracy theories and stuff. And it's funny because I found the shortwave. I'd heard that you could get it on one of those big old dishes they used to have back in the day, the big dish. And there was no way we could afford to buy one of those things. So the Bible teacher was on shortwave radio, which sounds way weird. I mean, people, what is shortwave radio? But it's just another band on the radio, and you can pick up broadcasts from all over the world, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And but anyway, I just stumbled on what else is on here besides Bible study, and I found like Alex Jones and all this conspiracy stuff, and which, by the way, most of it is true. I think that's what they do. They demonize things they want us to stay away from. You're not supposed to, like in Wizard of Oz, you're not supposed to look at that man behind the curtain. And you're just supposed to be a good little soldier and march forward and go make your money and pay your taxes and be a good citizen.
Yes.
Whatever that is.
I've taken some classes in college that touched upon that. Especially around religion as a form of social control. It was sociology of religion. It was one of my favorite classes because it really did. I kind of already had inklings around that, but it wasn't trying to make those institutions seem bad. We talked about the positive aspects of that as well, but that the social influence that they have sometimes can go too far, and that definitely can sway people's perception one way or the other if they are following with blind faith. And I just loved that. Was like early in my college career, and I will call it a career because it's like, I think I was in college longer than high school. So, or all primary education. So it's like, that was one of the first things. That was like a fascinating class. But yeah, I love talking conspiracy theories. So if you want to, like the Alex Jones stuff, it's like, we can go there. But I do want to make sure we have a half an hour left, so we have plenty of time. But
really?
I want to make sure no. But I want to make sure we have time to talk about that other thing that you had mentioned in your introduction stuff that I really, if you're comfortable sharing it, the thing about the light and the early on when you were younger, if you're comfortable, and if you're not, that's okay too. Of course, everyone's going to be like, come on, but
I don't mind sharing it at all. It was so quick and everything that really it isn't a lot to tell about it, except that it really is interesting. It was interesting for me anyway. And but I'd gone to, I call it going to town, because it seems like we always lived in the suburbs or in some right outside of, like maybe 5 miles or less outside of a town, a small town or small city, basically. That's kind of how I've lived really most of my adult life, really, except for a brief stint up in the Washington, D.C., but that was a whole other lifetime ago. But so I don't like big city because I was really raised in the suburbs, and I just prefer, quiet. I don't like high stress driving and all that stuff. But I had gone to the little town that we lived just outside of to go to the grocery store. I had my kids with me because they were young. And but my daughter was probably in the single digits somewhere, like probably, that's right. She was probably maybe 3 or 4. And my boys were, like 8, 9, somewhere in there. And so we were coming back, and there's a little 2-lane highway that we were on. There's no shoulder. There didn't used to be a shoulder on either side, and everything was a real curvy little highway, and it went over a river in this single lane bridge. You had to stop, and only one lane of traffic could come through. I mean, this is how small town area this is. But so you went over the steep bridge and came back, a drawbridge, and you come down, and then you just go just a little ways, and it makes like almost an S curve. And the last part of the S is a really big sweeping curve. So we start around that little, the small part of the curve, and suddenly here comes a car careening around the other curve and headed straight towards us. And I don't know, it's like I blinked and they were there, and they were going so fast. And I didn't have any time to react and nowhere to go. And I just gripped the windshield, the steering wheel, and closed my eyes real tight. I was like, oh, embraced myself. My kids were in their car seats, and they were probably reading or playing with some toy or something, or sleeping and not paying attention. But just as I went to close my eyes, I just see this light kind of swish across the windshield, across kind of the upper part of the windshield from right to left. And when I opened my eyes up again, because I wanted to see what that was, it was, I didn't see anything, and there was no car headed straight toward us. And, I look in the rearview mirror, and there's nothing, I don't see anything behind us. And I'm just like, what was that? I mean, it was just imminent. They weren't that far ahead of us, and they were coming so fast straight toward us. And there was nowhere for them to go either. And if they had swerved back in their lane, it should have been maybe screeching tires or something, because they were going that fast, and they would have had to make a sharp turn. So it's just one of those things that made me scratch my head and think. The first thing I thought was that an angel, like an angel wing or something? Mm-hmm. Was that, and I just was sort of dazed after that. And the kids didn't see anything. I mean, I think they might have asked what happened. And I was like, nothing. I didn't want them to, like, oh, we almost got killed. So, right. I didn't want to get them upset. And I didn't say anything to my husband then, because he was, this was when I was married to my kids' dad. And he was, he wouldn't have believed it. And he was like, oh, that's nice, Chris.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so it was really, I guess it's always been in the back of my mind.
Well, definitely. What a profound experience. And I mean, so dramatic, it's not like you were crossing the street and you had a near miss, which also would be profound and dramatic, but not in the same way as driving with your kids in the car, and it seems imminent, and then all of a sudden there's no sign of any of that happening other than that one white light, that then after that everything's back to normal.
I know, which is why, I kind of questioned, did that even happen afterwards?
Oh.
What did I just experience? Maybe, I don't know. I just totally didn't understand. And my logical mind was trying to, come up with some logical explanation, but I just couldn't come up with one.
Yeah. Does it feel better now that you've been a part of the lab and have studied what you've studied to believe it's something else?
Oh,
or
yeah.
To know what it is? Yeah. I have felt for most of I've felt ever since I was a young child that there is an angel that has been protecting me. And I do think it's the same angel. And it's one that when I was in my 20s and, had issues, I would talk to Angel. I didn't have specific names. It was just one that was there, but I've had a lot of near misses, nothing as significant as yours in the same way, but things where it's almost like that. Well, I've told this story, and it's not a big one. It's more like just recently I was walking to the orchestra with a friend of mine in downtown St. Paul, and there's a park there that is occupied by homeless people. And they keep to themselves most of the time, but sometimes they're on the sidewalk and they want to panhandle from the people going to the orchestra, understandably so, because people usually have money when they're going to the orchestra and are happy to, this is a pretty liberal area, and so people typically will give them money and stuff. But there was this one guy, and he was kind of teetering on in between the street and the sidewalk, and he looked like he had been drinking. He was kind of wobbly and stuff and kind of yelling at people as they're walking by. And he looked at me, and then his eyes got really wide, and then he like backed off. And I didn't have to do anything. And I'm kind of like, is my angel here with me? What was that? Because I'm like, but that's happened a couple of times with people who it just like seem like they may be menacing in some way, and they come, they get near me and they have like this kind of an hard to explain reaction. It's like something shifts in them and they back off. And I don't ever have to do anything. And I don't think I'm sending out this back off energy, although maybe I was, but it was like, whoa, that was so interesting. But the same things have happened. Like I told an earthquake story yesterday to a group where I called in sick as a walking messenger in San Francisco. The only day I ever called in sick because my heel hurt so badly I couldn't walk. And they're like, do you want a bike? And I'm like, no. Because if you've ever been in San Francisco or any large city where they have bike messengers, they're kind of crazy. And I'm like, I don't know my way around on bike. I'd totally get hit by a car. There's just no way. But so I'm in bed reading this book, and they have parallel universes that were colliding at the time. And then all of a sudden it's shaking in my room, and I'm thinking it's my imagination until my lamp falls over. And then I'm like, oh, it's an earthquake. Okay, so I had to.
So you're saying you were reading that, and at the same time, the earth started to move?
Yeah, so I didn't even know what was going on.
Oh my God!
It was freaky.
Like, wait a minute, am I just getting too into this story or what?
Yeah, but it was one of those things where a lot happened in a short period of time. But I was married to my first husband. He was working downtown. We found each other pretty easily. We were both safe. But what I keep thinking about were the buildings that I used to deliver to. One of them had exploded, like out all the glass in the corner. It was like corner of a building, and it all blew out. And glass from the buildings that I used to deliver to were falling onto the sidewalk and things. So had I gone to work that day, I think I probably would have been hurt or killed. And so it wasn't me specifically sensing it necessarily. Something showed up in my body, which I know Lauren Antrofermo's here, so she's going to be like, yeah, listen to your body. But that, I was in really good shape. And so it was weird that my heel had hurt anyway, even though I was walking a lot. It never hurt before, and it didn't hurt after. So it was really interesting to me how all of that, combined. And just there are a lot of stories like that. Riding a bicycle from Seattle to San Francisco with guitars on the backs of our bikes and things. There were these recreational vehicles that did not know their depth perception, the drivers, so they'd get like this close to our handlebars and things. There were times when we could easily have been knocked off a road or off a cliff, and we were always protected. Or when we were camping, there were weird people that were hanging out on occasion, but they never hassled us. They were just weird and standing there staring at us for a while, but they just go away. And it's like, oh, that is so cool. So anyway, I love those kind of experiences, and I wish I would have documented them at the time, because I think there are a lot that I've forgotten about. But now it's like, oh, thank you.
I know, because I know I've had others too. That was just the most dramatic. But but I can't think of a single example to give you right now of it seems like it's happened on the road a few other times, but just not as dramatically as that. And other things kind of like, sort of like what you've said, but or just things working out in a really odd, crazy, coincidental kind of way. Looking back especially, I can just see that, there's been so much protection, and that I have been guided, and, even when I just wasn't that, I didn't really realize it.
Yep. Well, that accident I had mentioned that I came across was a week ago yesterday with the person who had died and things like that. There were a series of events that led me to that road, but also a series of events that delayed me. And had they not delayed me, I could have been there at that time. So, it's definitely, there's a whole thank you. I used to be annoyed by being delayed for one reason or another. And I'm like, I'm totally fine with it now. It's like, if I need to be delayed, there's a reason for it, because there are so many times when I've come across accidents that have just happened. And I was for some reason or another at that time, delayed. It's like, okay, thank you. Really love that, not loving seeing the accident at all. Wish they didn't happen. But at the same point, thank you for keeping me safe and my family safe, so that we didn't have to be a part of that. There was another accident this week where it had just happened. You could see it. The tires were still spinning. It was like, whoa. And
Wow.
It also tells me to be really cautious when I'm driving, when I'm seeing this in such close proximity. It's like I'm on heightened awareness when I see those things, especially more than one in a short period of time. I think it was also around full moon time. So, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't like to drive around full moons anymore because of that. I still do, but it's like I tell my husband, full moon, be careful. People seem to have a different driving style in full moons, and probably other astrological events.
Probably so. Yeah, my kid's daddy said that my ex-husband said that he was a fireman for 30 years, and in Baton Rouge, which is a decent sized city, and he and all the people he worked with just swore by the full moon fever. Just I think that's what they called it. But just they would just get all kinds of calls, and the ambulance. One of the stations he worked at, there was it was EMS. The ambulance thing, like 911, I don't know what you call it, the 911 dispatch. And it was,
sure.
and they would talk about, just the crazy calls that they would get on full moon. So.
One of my first jobs was working at a healthcare center with people with Alzheimer's. I was a nursing assistant, and we had curtains that were pulled and everything this one night, and everybody was just acting up. This was a locked facility for people who had a tendency to wander or had wandered from a different long-term health place. And so their agitation level was often higher than maybe people that you'd find in a regular nursing home or long-term care home. But on this particular night, we're like, what is going on? And I remember walking over to the place with the curtains and opening it, and there's this huge harvest moon, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's what it is.
Okay, and I totally get it.
Yeah, I know. It's like, so ever since then, I've been a full believer, because I'm like, wow, we could so tell what was going on before we knew it. Knew what the cause was, and I believe that was the cause. Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, and a lot of times they have sundowning. And my dad had Alzheimer's, so a lot of times just night when you get toward the late afternoon, and as it's starting to go from daylight till dark, they do. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about? I'm sure you experienced that with them, the sundowning, and that's odd. I guess it must. I don't know. Never really understood that, but.
Well, I do think there's an aspect. I wonder if they, in a way, go back to their, is it circadian rhythms, that they become more attuned to those things. And so, I don't know. I mean, that maybe that's a transformation or transition that happens as a part of that, nobody studies any of the energetic aspects of aging, of working together, of, people in groups at all. And, it's one of the things that I really think is an important aspect to bring forward, because, how we respond to the energy around us is just as important as the physical aspects of living in a social environment, or even individually, really. And so, I'm kind of curious about that now. Now I'm going off. I can feel in my head going, "Ooh, I wonder about this."
A note for another time, huh? I'm going to have to check this out tomorrow, huh? I'm going to have to Google.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, random. Let me just throw this in here right quick before I forget it. I had to laugh when you said that at the very beginning about Wawa and what a cool name that was. And Robbie and I went to this to see a guy that, well, we both like him. He's a kind of a country western, I guess, sort of singer. And we went to see him back, I think it was really in the early summer, but the place was called Wawa.
Oh,
And
cool.
had been there for many years in New Orleans. So you just never know what a music venue in New Orleans will be called, but Wawa.
Is
So I
it
just had
still
to tell
there?
you that. Yeah. I mean, we went there, and it's this super old building, as a lot of the buildings are. It looks like it's probably always been a bar. And it was just a real small venue. I would have never expected this guy. He's not big time like top 40 country or anything, but it's been around a
Sure.
long time, and he does have a good following, and he plays in a lot bigger venues. And why he came, to that place, I'll never know. But Chickawawa, I have no
Good.
idea how it got its name.
I will add that to the show notes because I love that. And the name Wawa to me reminds me of Lily Tomlin, who's a comedian, for those of you who don't know. And she did this one thing with Barbara Walters Want a Glass of Wawa.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
stuck in my head, and I don't know why. And she said it in a much funnier way. But I'm just like, that's what I hear running through my head when I think of Wawa. And I'm like, okay, well, that's probably not what they named it after. But I've just never heard of it.
Gilda Radner or somebody, didn't they do a skit and they called her Barbara Wawa or something
Oh,
like that?
probably. Yes.
On
Because
Saturday
now I'm
Night
thinking,
Live?
yeah, well, and she used to dress up like Barbara Walters, who was a news anchor. Was that what they called her back then? Reporter. And was it during the evening news or, the weekend update or something like that, I think, with Dan Aykroyd or something. I'm just seeing the two of
Maybe.
them
I could
together.
be totally wrong. Whatever. Both of those would be a long time ago, a very long
Yeah,
time ago.
those are the best. If you have not watched 1970s versions of Saturday Night Live, you have to. It's so funny. For those of you
Oh,
watching,
yeah.
and it's like those were so good.
Yeah, Steve
I just
Martin and John Belushi and
yeah,
yeah, some of
Chevy
the original
Chase,
cast. Oh my gosh, yeah,
yeah,
it's hilarious.
Bill Murray,
Murray,
yeah,
yeah.
yep. Yeah, those are it's kind of around the same time I grew up with or was watching the Monty Python stuff. It's like my dad used to, now he watches a lot of news, but and old like silent movie night on Turner Movie Classics or something like that, which was also pretty interesting. But he's not watching as many of the funny things, but I grew up with those funny things, and I'm really glad because it definitely shaped my sense of humor, and I think life would not be as rich for me without that.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna just
love
write that down.
Faulty Towers. I remember watching some of
Oh
the
yeah.
Monty Python, and it seemed like they had a radio show or something too. Um,
They had the Flying Circus, and maybe they
oh,
did have a radio show. Um, and yeah, Faulty Towers. I didn't watch that, but my husband used to watch a lot of that. Um,
oh, it's
I was really
hilarious.
thrilled
Oh
when
my
it was
gosh.
still on.
Yeah, it's
I'm making notes
hilarious.
of all of those to add to the show notes so you can start watching all of these fun old show
I
programs.
know. And they were
So,
old when we were watching them. They were all, I guess
yeah,
they were made in the early 70s or something like that, maybe even the
yeah.
late 60s. So,
It's
yeah.
so interesting how, public broadcasts or PBS often puts those shows on, and my husband's like, okay, but that's a really old show. Why are they showing that? It's like there are all these other programs they could show, but I suppose they're probably free now or something. And I'm glad they do that. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. Can you believe it? So
I can't.
in that 10 minutes, what's on your mind? What would you like to talk about? Can't be a huge, long discussion, but anything else on top of mind, things that are you're focusing on these days that, might be fun to talk about?
Uh,
Top of mind stuff.
yeah, I was looking to see if I had anything that I wrote down, but mostly what I kind of scribbled down was some of the more spiritual stuff, which we've already really covered. And I can't think of anything.
Well, how about what are you doing in terms of like, do you have a regular spiritual practice? How do you incorporate light worker related things into your daily life?
I do. I really I'm blessed that I'm not working outside the home right now, and so I can spend all of my daytime pursuing all my many interests, but which are
That's
mostly
awesome.
in
Yeah.
the umbrella of spirituality. But I do every day. I mean, I have an altar behind me. I light a candle. I love to do incense. I love a little bit of ceremony, I guess. With it, but I say a prayer and I light the white candle, and I always say I'm gonna and I light this incense in your honor and for your pleasure, and a little quick story regarding, and I meditate every day too, somewhere like between a minimum of 20 minutes, but I like it more like 40 minutes to an hour, because now that it's gotten really interesting, I could just do it all the time. It's worth the pursuit. Nobody likes to really do it at first because you just feel like you're sitting there. But with your intention, it does eventually develop into a very rich thing, not just sitting there, relaxing. It's more to it than that. But one time I lit. I'm trying to hurry up. I'm getting tongue tied. I lit my incense, and it was on my birthday, this last June, and I went to meditate. And the first thing that came in was a few of my guides came in, a grizzly bear guide I just really found out that I had. It just showed me my incense with the smoke going up, and he was smiling, and just if to thank me, and then had fireworks go up. Like happy birthday. I took that as being happy birthday. So
Sure.
That was cool. And I don't know, it made me think of it with the altar and the incense and that happening. So it was really great. I had a couple other horse guide or totem. I'm not sure what their classification is. Kind of come in as well, and a Native American guide.
Do you use any particular oracle or tarot cards or anything like that, or do you just, or do you not?
It's on the back burner to learn tarot. I do have cards, and I do have several tools to learn, and I always say I'm going to learn them. I just haven't gotten there yet.
That's another Gemini trait, I think.
I know. Just like I buy books all the time, and it takes me a while to get around to reading them if I ever do. But I have got so many oracle cards. Right now, I like. I've been using the Wisdom of the Oracle by Colette Baron Reed, and I love. Where is it?
That's another one with super cool artwork. I don't have that deck. It's been on my wait list for ages, though, because I just love that artwork. Something with it really resonates with me.
Yeah, I don't know. I just always it just opens up more and more. I really just jive with it. And I've got her other one, the Wisdom of the Hidden Realms, which I like, but I don't use it quite as much. And the other one is, I can't believe I can't remember what it's called, Earth something, and I use it all the time too, but I've just gone blank on it, and I'm looking around and I don't see the box sitting in front of me, which it's probably just barely hidden by something.
Well,
and as soon as we're through, here it is. It's Earth Magic.
Oh.
How can I forget Earth Magic?
Is that from her too? From Colette Baron Reed?
No, that is Farmer. Stephen Farmer.
Okay.
But I've got a bunch of. I really like the cards by what's his name? Tony Carmine. Salerno, and I've got a bunch of Doreens. I don't really like hers as well for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's just where I am right now.
Sure. What's the Tony Carmine one?
I've got the Spirit Oracle and Gaia Oracle. I've got so many. The Gods and Goddesses is a good one.
Wow.
And what else? Wisdom, the Wisdom Oracle. That's probably my top ones that I use from her. I guess it's her. It's Toni.
Oh,
But
okay.
now that I think of it, I think it's now I'm picturing a man, so it may be. I think it is a man now. Come to think of it, it's just usually you think Toni as being more
Visual.
what a woman would
Yeah,
have for her
that's
name.
how I used to think of it. You never know anymore.
No, you
And
don't.
that's fine. Yeah. Good.
Look, I was
Like,
Chris, always just Chris growing up. No Christine, no Christy, no, it's just Chris, and no middle name either. So
oh, see, you
it was
don't have a
tough
middle
growing
name.
up with a name like that.
I
You
have
don't
a
either?
middle I have a middle initial that doesn't stand for anything. So like when I joined the Navy,
Really?
they want to know, when you have to write things
Oh,
out, it's supposed to include everything, right? And I'm like, it's just A. And they're like, what do you mean it's just A? I'm like, it's just A. There's no name. It's not short for anything. There's no abbreviation. It was really hard to get that through.
it blew their mind,
Okay,
huh?
I have to go like A and then NMN for no middle name. It's like, so they just added something. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I like that because it helped make me unique.
Well, I
Like,
was NMN, no middle name,
yeah,
was what my
oh,
classification was for middle name.
I love
I
that.
wasn't in the Navy though.
No, but still, there's a lot of times when you have to add that. Who knew? I doubt that our parents knew that when deciding or not deciding to have that. And I'm totally fine with an initial, and I would have been fine without a middle name or a middle initial even. It's like middle names used to serve a different purpose, I think, and now that's evolving. What I like now is that some of my friends, we're really close to the end of our time. Some of my friends, after getting divorced, have changed their last names to one that they really like. So I have a couple of friends now who have done that, and I'm like, man, I've always kept my own name, my original name. So if I were to change my name, it would have a very different meaning. But I'm like, I like the idea of being able to pick our last names, and what would that be? And okay, so the sky's the limit or beyond, right? It's
Right.
like, and that just keeps my mind occupied on a boring day. If I want to think about something, it's what would my last name be if I changed it?
Right. That's
Anyway,
funny.
so on that note, I just want to, thank you so much for taking the time to spend your Saturday with us to tell us more about yourself and let us learn more about you. I, hope to have you on again. I know that we are part of some of the similar groups that are taking place around like the spiritual business community, or is that what it's, the spiritual business community?
Coaching.
Coaching. Thank
Coaching.
you. I knew it was
Yeah,
something.
with Chris Collier.
Yes. Highly
Yeah.
recommend it for those of you
Yes,
considering it for
absolutely.
January.
Yes.
And
And thank you too. You're welcome, and thank you for asking me. I've just really enjoyed it so much. Just like sitting down, having a cup of coffee with a friend, and
yeah,
I
just
love
like I said, right? We're just like,
it.
it's like
Was
we're
exactly. Yep.
all right. So for those of you watching, I'll have show notes available and get those out yet today. I will also work on the replay of this video, which will be available in the Lightworkers Lab as always, but also on my website and YouTube. And I'll have that out, if not today, then by Monday. And I am having a special edition of Megan's Mystical Minds Mystical Mashup on Thursday at 1 o'clock until 2:30 Central Time. That guest will be Christian Kuna. So I hope you join us. And then thanks again, Chris, so much for being here. And I wish you and everybody watching and everybody watching on the replay a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you around in the lab.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sure. Bye.